Welcome back to the shop. As you can see in front of me, I have an SBR Rocketry 4-inch Diablo kit. It's made out of cardboard, has plywood fins, and it has a plastic nose cone. Now this video isn't about the rocket itself, although I have to say it's a very nice little rocket. What I'm going to be doing with the rocket is what this video is about, and that is converting it to fly at night. Now there are many different rockets that you can convert to fly at night. The reason that I chose the Diablo 4-inch to fly at night is because it's very versatile. What I mean by that is if I'm flying at a club that doesn't have a high power launch waiver at night, that means that my rocket has to conform to FAR 101 standards. This means a takeoff weight of no more than 1,500 grams and less than 125 grams of propellant. So this rocket needs to be relatively lightweight if I want to fly at a low power model field at night or when the high power waiver is not active. However, the rocket does have a 38mm diameter motor mount, so I can fly at high power if I want. So with the weight being low and a variety of motor choices to use, I thought this would be a great rocket to convert for night flying. Additionally, for flying a rocket at night, I wanted a rocket that was simple to prepare. This means no electronic dual deployment. I just want motor deploy, a simple motor mount here, and easy recovery on a rocket this size. So I can fly this rocket on a smaller motor, send it up to a low altitude, and recover it very easily. Or if I'm at a large enough field, I can send it up higher on a bigger motor. With all that said, it's time to prepare the rocket for night flight. But first things first, what I want to do is I want to paint the body tube and the fins. That'll just give it some moisture protection. I'll be right back. Okay, much better. Now, with the rocket body painted, we can install the rail buttons, the motor retainer, and get to work on the lights. Now, I've been attending multi-day rocket launches for 5 years now, camping overnight, and I've been enjoying watching other people fly their night rockets. However, this year I wanted it to be my turn to participate as well, and so I'm ready to get started converting this rocket for night flying. To do so, I'm going to use these LED light strips I got off of Amazon. They're pretty affordable. This kit comes with 2 different strips that are 6 feet long, and I got 2 different kits. So I have a total of 4 strips just to make sure I don't run out of lights while I'm building this rocket here. The other nice thing is this rocket's relatively short, so I shouldn't go through a whole lot of lights decorating the sides of the rocket. Now I've got a couple ideas to increase the illumination of the rocket, especially with the fins. So I'll be installing the lights on the body tube first, and then I'll work on the nose cone, and I'll have 2 separate light systems going at the same time. Now this particular kit doesn't have a remote control for it, so I'll also be setting up the rocket so that I will not have to open up any hatches to turn the lights on and off, because I want to make it as easy as possible to do rocket prep at nighttime. The first thing that I'm going to do to prepare the body tube for light installation is cut a hatch here for the battery box. Now I'll be installing the battery box inside the body tube here, where the motor mount is between the 2 centering rings. That'll protect the battery box from the pressurized hot gases during the ejection charge. Now, right now for this rocket, I'm just going to be using the standard battery box setup here with 3 AA batteries. When I get a chance later, I'll convert it over to lithium batteries, but I just don't have any spares right now. And there's plenty of room inside here to set up the box. So what I'm going to do is mark the location where I want to cut the opening here, and we'll get started on that. And as you can see, I made a mark earlier. This denotes where the top centering ring is. So there's lots of room between the bottom and the top centering ring to mount the battery box. First thing I'm going to do here is mark longitudinally where I'd like the battery to go. This is a good spot right here, right in the middle. I'll be able to come back with the pencil in a little bit and make those lines a little bit darker. And to run some lines up and down the body tube, I can simply use a spacer here up against the fin. The nice thing is I can do this and mark up the body tube and no one's going to see it because I'm going to be flying this thing at night. So I'm going to make the opening just a little bit larger than the battery box. Doesn't have to be that big. Apologize for the dogs, they like to bark at anything that moves and some things that don't. There we go, so I've got the box drawn out for where I'm going to make the cut. I'm just going to use this popsicle stick right here to draw a radius for each of the corners. And this will help prevent any stress risers in the body tube, since I will be cutting into it. However, I've got the centering rings on both sides, which will help with the strength of the body tube. And I'll be gluing a doubler inside as well. Alright, there we go. There's my opening for the battery box. I'll get to work with the hobby knife and start cutting on that. Okay, so that's it for cutting the hatch out here. Now the very first thing I do when I open it up here is I'm going to mark which direction is up. There we go. Okay, now we'll get to work on cutting out the doubler and installing it inside. Alright, to make the backing I'm going to use a 4-inch coupler section here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the hatch that I just cut out, I'm going to mark the outline here, and then I'll space it out a little bit more using the popsicle sticks that I used for spacing earlier. So I'm basically going to have 3 lines on this backing here. The first is going to be the actual outline of the hatch, and the next set will be the outer section, which is what I'm going to cut. And then I'll have an inner section, and that's going to be what the hatch actually rests on. Okay, so I've got the outer lines drawn here. I've got the middle line here, which is the size of the hatch itself. Now I can draw one more set of lines for the battery box, and that will be the inner lines for cutting out the doubler. Okay, so here's the doubler all cut out and ready to be installed. Now you notice it's bigger than the window, but that's fine. You can simply just kind of bend it and fit it in place. So I'm going to get some wood glue out. Glue this into position here, inside of course, and I'll just use my mini clamps to hold the doubler in place while the glue dries. Okay, so just planning out my light arrangement here. I've got one strand that's going to go in a spiral up the body tube here. Originally I wanted to go in lines up and down, but the problem is it's hard to make a sharp bend with this type of LED tape. So that's okay, we'll just do spirals on the way up, and this was just fitting right here. I wanted to see how many loops around I could do while finishing off the top here, just going across the very top. So I know the spacing isn't perfect right now. What I'm going to do is just take this space, divide it by I believe 5, and I'll make evenly spaced marks here, and that's what I'm going to be aiming for when I lay down the lights. Now I'd like to run 2 light strips on the body tube, but I don't want to use 2 power packs to do it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to clip the wires from one of the packs, and I'll strip the ends and carefully solder them in a parallel fashion to the wires on this other battery box here. This will give the same voltage to each of the controllers here and to the lights. It'll just use twice as many amps, but the AA batteries have lots of power, and the lights will last a long time. Okay, moment of truth. I've got the 2 controllers soldered together, so I'll plug them in to the lights here. There's a certain way that they have to go. There's an arrow on the connector. It goes into the little plus sign. Alright, so those both should be connected properly here. 2 different sets of lights. Let's see if it works. There you go. Alright, they're each on different cycles here, but I can use the mode button to sync them up to be the same type of flashing light if I want. Okay, so just planning out where I'm going to sit the battery box. It's going to go all the way aft inside the compartment here, and that'll leave some space up front to stuff the wires in. Now I'm going to drill the holes for the screws to hold the hatch on, but before I do that, just have to do a little planning ahead. I'm going to have 2 wires coming out. They're going to be these wires right here. One's going to go out the corner, and one's going to go a little bit to the left here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut away a little bit of the backing here, and then I'll cut away some of the hatch itself to make a nice hole for the wires to go through, and then we can drill and install the screws after we take the battery box out. Okay, so here's the finished hatch right here. I've got 5 screws holding it in place. I'm just going to take the hatch off, put some thin CA on the backing where the holes are for the screws. That'll make it nice and tight when I put them back on. Alright, finally time to install the battery box into the body tube here. I added a little bit of soft-sided Velcro on the bottom of it to rest up against the aft centering ring just to provide some cushion. And I've got the hook side Velcro here, loop side, soft side on the body tube itself. So I'm just going to work this thing in as far back as I can and then push it down firmly against the Velcro. There we go. That's fully against the aft centering ring there. And as you notice, I've mounted it a little bit off center. The reason for that is I'll have the switch very close to the edge of the hatch here, so I'll know exactly where to drill a hole to access the switch, so I can just reach in and hit the switch on or off without having to take the hatch off. Okay, now the battery box is in place. I'm going to start adding the lights to the body tube here. I'll start with the spiraling body tube lights, and then I'll do the lights on the fins. Okay, there we go. There's the spiral lights there. Spacing isn't perfect, but you know what? I'll take it. Alright, before I get started on the LED lights on the fins, I wanted to add something that will hopefully add a little bit of color and light to the rocket at night. And that is, I like having all these individual LED lights, but if I can just get a little bit more light reflection off of the rocket, it might make it shine even better. So I've got this little bit of extra chrome monocoat trim strip here. So I'm going to cut some off here like so. It's going to be the right size just to cover partially the fins here. I don't want it to cover all the fins because then all of the strength of the LED lights will be based on the strength of the trim monocoat, which may not be that great. So this way the LED lights will be partially on the paint, partially on the monocoat, and the monocoat will wrap around the leading edge of the fins, so that should prevent air from getting under it here. So we'll just give it a try and we'll see how it looks. Okay, there's some reflective monocoat here on all three fins. Now it's time to add the actual lights. Alright, and here's how the lights look on the fins here. I have a band going on the leading edge of the fin all the way around, and just trying to be very careful as I wrap the LEDs around the edges of the fins. You can see I didn't get that one all the way down, and that's fine. The only side that's going to look a little odd as I switch to the back here is just the aft fin, and that's going to be facing the rail buttons anyway, or the rail anyway. So that should look real nice. I'm also going to add a little bit more chrome monocoat here on the body tube, since there isn't much for lights right there, and one on the hatch as well. That should look real nice. Now there are a couple ways to light up the nose cone for night flying. One way is to run my lights on the exterior of the nose cone, just up and down. Another way is to install them internally and allow the light to shine through the plastic nose cone. In either event, I'm going to want to install my battery inside the nose cone, so that means cutting off the bottom here and installing a removable bulkhead. So I'll get started on that now. So before I commit to mounting my lights internally in the nose cone, I just wanted to make sure that enough light's going to shine through on the plastic nose cone here. So I just threw a wad of LEDs inside and went into a dark room in my house. I'm going to turn it on and we'll see how it looks. Oh, look at that. That's going to be perfect. Alright, back to work. Using my circle cutter and the techniques that I've used in the past, I've cut a couple bulkheads here that'll go in the nose cone. The larger diameter bulkhead will be the one that's attached inside the nose cone, and I'll cut a larger circle here for the electronics to fit through, but before I do that I'm just going to drill this for the screws and the blind nuts to hold everything in place. And now you might notice that the three holes, or the three locations that I've marked, are completely non-symmetrical, and that's okay. This will prevent me from trying to line it up symmetrically when it looks close but it isn't. I'll also make some marks on the bulkhead itself so that when I'm trying to put these things in at night it won't be too bad. I'm also using Phillips head screws instead of socket head because I always have a Phillips head screwdriver nearby. So I'm just going to get started by drilling each of these three holes to a pilot hole, and then I'll step up to a 9/64 diameter, which will be enough to tap in the blind nuts here. There we go. With the larger holes drilled, I'll be able to tap in the blind nuts for the 40 screws. Now I also drilled the holes large where the screws are going to go through because I don't want to have to try and thread these things through the wood, and I want to have a little bit of wiggle room while I'm trying to line up the bulkhead to screw these things in place. Perfect. With the blind nuts in place, I can remove the screws and cut out the larger hole for the installed bulkhead. So I have the inner diameter cut out of the bulkhead here, which now makes it a centering ring. That's going to be inside the nose cone. Now before I start installing and gluing stuff, I want to just do a parts layout here. So to avoid having any shadowing effects going on inside the nose cone, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my strip of LED lights and wrap it around a body tube. And that way there will be nothing between the LEDs and the plastic, so there shouldn't be any shading effects. Maybe just some little ones, but it shouldn't be so bad. So the plan is to install the body tube on the center of the removable bulkhead like that. And then I've got this large AA battery pack right now. Eventually I'm going to change this out for a LiPo battery, but right now I simply don't have any extra batteries that are the proper voltage for powering these LEDs. So the AA's will work for now. The plan is I'm going to have them sitting right up against this body tube like so, and I can see that what I'll need to do is I'll need to cut out some of the centering ring here that'll go inside the nose cone, and that's fine. So I'll just mark that and get the Dremel out. Alright, so I've removed the centering ring and Dremeled out the area that I needed to. And just a quick test fit for everything here. I'll put the body tube back. There's the battery pack right there. That's going to fit great. I can always Dremel out a little bit more if I need to, but right now I'm going to pull the parts apart, install a 1/4 inch eye bolt for the recovery harness, and then I can glue in the body tube. So I have the eye bolt mounted and the body tube permanently mounted in place. As you can see, I also added a gusset here to help with the strength of holding the body tube in position. So now what I want to do is mount the battery box. This is the size of it right here. It's pretty big. It holds 3 AA batteries and it has some weight to it. So that's a little unfortunate for now. Eventually, like I said, I will swap that out for a 1-cell lithium battery. These lights are made for 5 volts, and at 4.2 volts fully charged, a 1-cell pack should work pretty well. Alright, so anyway, to mount the battery box, I added some Velcro on the back, and I'm going to put in place a little strip of soft-sided Velcro on the body tube. And to cushion the battery box against the bulkhead here, I'm just going to add a little soft-sided Velcro on the bottom here. And it's not going to be attached to anything on the battery box, it's just going to act as a little bit of foam. Okay, there we are with the foam in position. The battery box is mounted in place. Now I'm going to run some electrical tape around the body tube and the battery box to hold it nice and secure. So let's mount the lights now. I'm going to start by peeling off the backside of the lights at the base, and I'm going to start spiraling them all the way up the body tube. And now I know I have enough length on this strip of LEDs to keep them very closely spaced, so I can get as many lights on the body tube as I can. So I'm going to get to work on that now. There we go. After fit testing the electronics through the centering ring, I was happy with it, so I mixed up some rock epoxy and installed the centering ring into the nose cone here, as you can see. I used some thin CA to hold the centering ring in position. I can feel how warm it is right now as the CA is setting and the epoxy is curing. So I just set this aside and let this cure. After the epoxy set on the centering ring and the nose cone, I installed the bulkhead with the lights and the battery box inside. I did some careful measuring and drilled a hole here for access to the switch, and amazingly it actually turned out really well. I can reach it easily with the screwdriver, so I can turn it on and off without having to take off the bulkhead. So that makes this rocket about as easy as can be for setting up for a night launch. We're at the end of the build for the SBR Diablo converted into a night rocket. Now there's only one thing left to do, and that is to see if I made it under the weight limit for FAR 101. Now this might be a moot point for the most part, because when I typically fly at the events, we do have a night waiver for flying high power rockets at night now, which is great. But you never know, I might end up at a club that doesn't have a waiver for night flying, and I would really like to be able to fly this rocket under any conditions. So I've got everything put into the rocket here. I've attached the motor retainer, I've got the parachute and the chute protector inside, I've got the batteries inside, all the lights of course. I've added more weight than I thought I would, mostly because those AA batteries added quite a bit. Now I weighed all this rocket, the rocket before I put in the night gear, and it came out around 780 grams. So I felt that I had quite a bit of overhead to work with. However, with all the parts installed and the motor that we have to account for, it's time to see what this rocket weighs. Okay, so I had to move the camera to a little bit of an angle here because there was quite the glare on the LCD display, but this is my trusty US Postal Service scale. It's set to grams right now, and I do have the entire rocket here. It's got the retainer all the way through the nose cone. So we're going to set her on the scale. Alright, looks like the airframe itself is right around 1220 grams. Now if I were to fly at FAR 101, then I would probably use my Hobbyline case and a G motor. So I've got the case right here. Alright, 1281 grams. Now we'll add in the G64 reload. There we go, 1384 grams. So easily under the 1500 gram limit, ready to fly. So now I can legally fly this rocket as an FAR 101, just plain old model rocket. Finally, we've got the rocket together, all the lights are set, and there's one more thing to do before we take it out to the field, and that's turn on the lights and see how it looks. And there it is. That looks good. It looks good here with the lights on. Let's see how it looks with the lights off. I gotta be honest, I just need a minute to take this in. This rocket looks fantastic. I love how the nose cone has a glow, got the bright LED lights on the body tube, and if you position the fins just right, you can get some of the reflection from the monocoque trim that's chrome. So that should help out seeing a little bit more light as the rocket ascends. I think this thing turned out perfect. I can't wait to fly it. Well, the time's come for me to turn the lights off on my night rocket, set it aside, and keep preparing for my first big launch of the year. How's this thing going to fly? We'll find out. I'll see you at June Swoosh.